Zena Hitz, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much, Jared. It's great to be here.
So I have talked to a lot of people for this podcast at this point, and often at lunch afterwards or something, I'll ask them if they think there's a guest that I need to invite.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one name I have been given is Zena Hitz.
That's very charming. Thank you.
Sometimes
Thank
I
you.
don't even have to ask them. Like, and they're just like, why isn't Zena Hitz on the podcast?
That's very embarrassing, but thank you. It's very nice.
So, and I wanted to talk to you because I was first exposed to your work through Lost in Thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I read Lost in Thought, I found out about the Catherine Project.
Yeah.
I've now participated in one Catherine Project group.
Very good, very good.
And I want to do more. It's just about, finding the right time.
Of course.
But you started this thing, the Catherine Project. So could you just start by telling us like what it is and also how you got started?
Right. So I had some kind of longing back from when I was straight out of grad school and started teaching undergrads. Intro to philosophy and stuff like that. And so a lot of a job at a public university teaching philosophy is teaching people who don't want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I developed this kind of preoccupation with like, what would it be like if you tried to find the people who only want to learn?
Mm-hmm.
Like, suppose you could just filter out the desire to learn. So my first idea was to just have an open ancient Greek study group in Baltimore, which is where I was living at the time. And we went to the Peabody Library, which is a beautiful place. We were going to read the Iliad, and this wonderful librarian helped us out. And a couple people turned up. They were like grad students at Hopkins or whatever. So it turned out to be, and my friends, so it was very small. And I realized I didn't know how to reach people in an ordinary city who would not want to do something like this. Mm-hmm. So there was a kind of a contact problem. How do I find these people? But I was still kind of haunted by the dream, and it kind of sat in the back of my mind for, I don't know, it was probably 20 years and 15 years. And then as I talk about in Lost in Thought, I went through all kinds of transitions and tried to figure out what to do with my life, and finally settled on going back to St. John's to teach. So I went back in 2015, and then in 2020, of course, we had emergency online COVID classes, which anyone who was teaching at the time knows was absolutely miserable, like just the worst kind of teaching you could imagine, because it was unexpected, and these people were in their parents' basement, and I was teaching a class called Junior Math, which was Newton's Principia. It's one of the hardest books I know, and we just couldn't do it.
That was a very St. John's sentence, by the way.
I have a lot of St. John's sentences. I am a Johnny born and bred, so that's the way it is. But we couldn't do it, and because reading something that difficult requires having an in-person community to talk to people and get help and stuff like that. So we kept trying. We put in a college try, but it was really painful. Anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. So the point is, I was really upset about being online emergency. I wanted to just send everyone home with, and give them a chance maybe to fix their grade. But we had to do it. So I was very frightened. I thought, once universities figure out that they can have classes online, they're never going to go back because it's so cheap. Yeah. Administrators are just like that. They just want stuff that's cheap. They don't care about educational quality. So I was very angry, and that sometimes can be very productive. So what would be if I were stuck on this forever, what would be the best way to learn? What would be the best way to teach? I thought, maybe it was a bit like an Oxford tutorial situation where, people went away and read off screen and then had face-to-face conversations in person. Or by Zoom in this case. So small groups on Zoom are better than medium-sized groups, and medium-sized groups are better than large groups. The larger the group, the worse it is. The smaller it is, the closer it is to real human interaction. So that was one thing that I was kind of stewing back there. And then the book came out at the same time. Lost in Thought came out. And Lost in Thought made this argument that the life of the mind is for everybody. And I say this a lot, and it's true. That was really kind of a sentimental idea I had. Like, maybe if I have a Greek reading group in Baltimore, like old Greek guys will show up and want to read Greek with me. I didn't really know it was true, but I wanted it to be true. And then I started getting all of these emails from people who wanted to lead a life of the mind, who wanted to read the great books, and they would ask me what they should do. And I didn't have a good answer for that question, and that haunted me. So somehow these two things percolated, and eventually I thought, well, look, let's just have open online Zoom classes on great books, and it'll be totally open. Anyone can go. We'll make it free. We'll run on volunteer labor. I'll tap into my academic network, get some professors, and I'll get some former students to lead more informal reading groups. And so that was the Catherine Project. And it was sort of born and bred on Twitter. So it was through Twitter that I got to know people who might be interested in something like that. And this was the golden age of Twitter when everyone was on it because it was COVID and the algorithms exposed you to all kinds of people. So anyway, what happened? So we started out with about 45 students. We had these things called tutorials. They were small groups, like we started with groups of 3 students and 1 professor. We had 5 of those, and they read, we had an early divide between people who wanted to read fast, people who wanted to read slow. So some of them just read the Iliad and the Odyssey. Some read the Iliad, the Odyssey, some Greek tragedy, and some Plato. And we had 2 reading groups, which were meant just for people in those tutorials. One was on Aristophanes, and one was on Kafka, the trial. So we had these 45 people, and November 2020 comes around, and the Kafka group wanted a few more people because they wanted to read Kierkegaard, either or. And it's November. I was teaching full time. I was just like, put something on Twitter, like who's up for reading either or on Saturday nights. I got like 100, 120, 130 replies. So I was like, like I have to do something about this. I can't reject 100 people. I can't reject 125 people. They wanted like 3 people for their group. So at that point, we pulled in a bunch of reading group leaders. And then for a long time, Catherine Project became mainly these peer-led reading groups. So I got, some people had PhDs, some people had master's degrees, some people were just really good people who had gone through great books programs as undergraduates, facilitating these open conversations about great books in small groups. So at the end of spring 2021, I was totally out of steam. I was dead. And I applied to Emergent Ventures, which is Tyler Cowen's group, for a grant. Had no expectation of getting it because I'd spoken to Tyler a year earlier when I was just getting started, and he had asked me, he put me through just the ringer, like just the hardest set of questions anyone had ever asked me about the business plan and how big was it going to grow and how are we going to fund it and what was going to be the source of revenue. And I couldn't answer any of those questions. I just had this like romantic idea that if you opened up the doors, people would come. Anyway, Tyler, after a year, had given me the grant based on what we had done without a budget. We hired Jordan Pointer, who had been one of the Kierkegaard group leaders, and he's been with us ever since, the executive director. And he set it up as a 501c3. So ever since then, there's been like a real Catherine Project. So Catherine Project is an open, which I should have said at the beginning, it's an open online intellectual community where people of all walks in life, people of all ages can read great books together. Jordan did an amazing job running it. So when he was all by himself, he was just working by himself. So he got us up pretty fast to something like 500 people at once. And then we had to hire someone else. He was sort of burning both ends. This wonderful person named Ashley Cohn. Those are still our 2 main staff. We now have a philanthropy director. And we the last thing I'll say, we got very large. We're now enrolling 1,600 human beings per semester. And one of the things that helped us with that last spurt of growth is we had started with these tutorials with the reading groups that were supplemental. But we were worried that the list of reading groups was actually really intimidating for anyone who wanted to come into the reading, the stuff like this for the first time. It's a huge list of books, many of which I had never heard of. And we wanted to be a way for we always wanted to be a way for people without much experience with this to find their way into reading and thinking and having conversations. So we instituted, this is the end of the second year, so we're now teaching the fourth unit of what's called our core program. And it's basically just a set of readings that we think are basic, that are a good introduction to the life of the mind that we think will serve people well in the future. So that's become a big component of what we do. We still run a trillion reading groups. Anyway, that's the story of the Catherine Project. So.
When I was participating, I did a Kierkegaard reading group on the concept of anxiety.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is, I think, the most difficult book I've ever read.
Just try Newton's Principle. No, just kidding.
but I mean, I loved the experience because we had the facilitator was a graduate student in Germany, and then we had a few other people in various parts of Europe, a couple of undergrads, and then just a few people who I had no idea what their academic background was, but they were joining from their lunch break, essentially, at their desk job, right? And it was just great. Like I loved how open the conversations were.
Yeah.
I loved how I never felt the sense that anyone there didn't feel like they could participate or could try, like, put an idea out there.
Right.
And there was just this idea of taking what everyone said really seriously.
Yes.
Which also means being critical of what they said.
Yes.
But
that's
without
right.
like domineering in that way. I found it to be like this really amazing experience. And now I'm like, how can I make sure I have a 2-hour block once a week? Because I have to like get back to like reading more from the Catherine Project.
Thank you. Yeah, the pedagogy, our approach is basically the approach of St. John's. So it's collaborative conversation. So experts don't teach our courses, and although in the core program they tend to be people who have they're experts in something, but they're not necessarily experts in what they're teaching. But they have more experience.
Which is what you would see at St. John's, right?
Which is what you would see at St. John's.
You're not an expert in Principia Mathematica.
No, I'm really not. Yeah, now I'm doing Faraday and Maxwell, which I'm even less of an expert in than Newton. And yeah, it's very challenging and very fun. But to me, it seemed like the perfect kind of pedagogy for our situation. I mean, I'm attached to it, obviously. I teach at St. John's. I went to St. John's. But it's also something which is extremely simple. It needs very few resources. You really just need a book, some people to talk to, and someone who has a sense of what this kind of conversation looks like, who can kind of pass on the habit. So it just seems like in a time when people aren't reading, and the liberal arts are collapsing, I just wanted to get this practice out into the culture. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that idea that you had that you said was sort of this romantic or sentimental idea that the life of the mind is for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm actually writing a book about this too.
Okay, very good. We need all the books, yes.
We'll talk about that later if you want, off camera. But, I firmly believe this. But one of the things that my experience in the Catherine Project showed me is that, people from very different walks of life, people who are studying very different things. I'm pretty sure some of the undergrads were not even humanities majors. And yet they were able to just sit with this text. We read maybe 20 pages a week. The concept of anxiety is dense but not long.
Right.
And just if you could put them in a context where they were going to be asked not just to respond to questions, I think this. If you're in the classroom, the worst thing you can do when you first sit down or stand up in front of the class is to say, "So what did you all think of this?" Because everyone looks at you and goes, "Well, I read it."
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But there was this kind of inversion where, especially I think starting with the second session, it was just like, who has a question about the text? What was the thing you don't understand, or what was an insight that you thought you had but you wanted to explore? and we would just all go around and share these, and like the facilitator would write them down and then sort of guide the conversation, mostly to say
Right.
like, oh, well, these two questions are maybe the same question. So
Right.
let's talk about that first.
Right.
But then it just took off on its own.
Yeah.
And what you just saw was like anybody who kind of maybe they need to be sort of initiated into the process of
Right.
it, but basically anybody could do
Yeah.
it. And the Catherine Project also, it doesn't require an educational background
That's
to
right.
apply.
That's
I
right.
think the only rule is that you're 16, right? Is there
The only rule is that you're 16, and there is an application, but a statement of interest, we call it. But we're really just trying to make sure that the people know exactly what they're doing. So at the very beginning, I haven't been involved in the nitty gritty for a long time, but I remember at the very beginning, a young woman reached out to me, and she was like, "Yeah, I just want summaries of the great books. Yeah, no, yeah, reading the great books is not for this stage of my life. I just want summaries of them, So we would want to filter out someone who didn't understand that they had to be there, participate, and read, But otherwise, there are no admissions requirements. That's right.
Do most people who participate, do you think they have like graduate degrees? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it sort of overdrew from those people, the people who already were interested enough to go to grad school. But, I've talked to other people. We have a mutual friend, I think, Bria Sanford.
Yes.
And she's like, yeah, I'm sometimes in groups where the majority of people, like I was in one group where the majority of people were self-described stay-at-home moms.
Yes.
And they were just
Yes.
as enthusiastic about these novels as anybody else.
Yeah, I think we are still drawing a pretty broad range. Some pretty young people in high school or college, people just out of college, retired people. There's a big chunk of people who are in their 30s and 40s who work in, say, tech, or they have worked in tech or in something like that, or in STEM engineering. And they've realized, having been on a really intense career path, that they're missing something. So we get a lot of people like that. When I will say this about the advanced degrees, when I first started, immediately we started getting applications from people who were graduate students or professors in humanities programs. And my instinct at first was, absolutely not. You can't come to our program. It's for people that don't have an intellectual community, who have never been able to do this kind of thing. Part of what I came to realize, and we softened up, we do let those people come. And they do form a part of our community, an important part of our community. And it made me realize just how scarce intellectual community is.
Yeah.
That is, you can be a professional intellectual at a major university and not have anyone to talk to, or not feel that you do, or feel so locked into your specialty that you can't just talk about something that's interesting, or read a book that might help you understand something about life, but which isn't in a specialized research field.
I went to a PhD program that was very much on the start professionalizing very early, start specializing very early track. And I would occasionally try to organize research groups. And what I really had to pitch to people, or reading groups, and I would have to pitch to people, this might contribute to your dissertation. Because
that's so sad.
They all felt, and if we had ever just decided, I mean, I don't think I at the time wouldn't have pitched this, but why don't we all just read Plato together? Because none of us have read enough Plato.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have gotten anybody interested, because and that's at a philosophy program, but it was still just because people are like, well, I do logic, or I do meta ethics, and I'm going to only read logic and meta ethics for the next 5 years. And so if you just wanted to sort of broaden your intellectual horizons, or just have fun, because one of the things I think people leave out of this when they talk about the life of the mind, it sounds so airy and lofty. It's actually quite pleasurable.
Yes.
It's quite enjoyable.
Yes.
And you also don't know if some insight from Plato might spark an idea in some completely different field that you work in too.
Right.
But people are afraid to branch out.
Yes.
And the Catherine Project feels very freeing in that regard, and feels very liberating. Yes.
No, it's my experience that the specialization of academia is in most cases, if not all, really bad for academic work. That if you look at the past, the really spectacular works of the mind are by people who read broadly and thought broadly, and who were using every part of their minds, their imagination, their emotional life, whatever it is, to think about things. So I do think it's not just a simple pedagogy. It's not just accessible. It also, I think, provides kind of the soil for the whole thing. There's things that we don't do, and there are things that we can't do that I think are really good. That I wish we could do, or I wish someone would do. But I do think we are providing something core. That is something that basically everyone who's thinking about something, even if it's something relatively technical, needs to have to do.
What are those things that you don't do, but you wish you could do? And in some perfect world where the Catherine Project has infinite money and infinite resources.
Well, I should say this. We might do it. It wouldn't require a perfect world. One of the things I'm thinking about now is the collapse of actually specialized research training in the humanities. So lots and lots of graduate programs at the moment are shuttered. They're not admitting new students. And it may just be a freeze for a time, but it's hard to see that it's not the beginning of a shift. And I think it was going on for a while anyway, but then the cuts in the science funding that the Trump administration put in last year kind of shook up the administrators. And one gets the sense that they were funding, or in their view, they were funding graduate humanities programs with some of the excess money from the sciences that's been cut. And I do think part of what I try to do when I'm thinking about things like this is to think not about what would be good for one person or other person, but what's the whole ecology of humanistic learning? Like, what are all the things that need to be in place for humanistic learning to be part of what we do as a culture, as a community? And it seems to me we do need people who are working at a deep and serious level on the books or on basic humanistic topics. So I have been trying to think about ways in which, and I think it's very compatible with Catherine Project. It just needs some kind of residential or brick and mortar context. But I wonder whether there's a real appetite among many of our members, and actually especially our staff, Jordan and Ashley. There's a real appetite to do in-depth work. It's incredibly refreshing to read a great book and to be reading them all the time when you don't have you've had to leave grad school, you've left academia, or even if as a supplement to what you're doing in your highly specialized academia. But it all seems to be supported by people who've sat with books for a long time and have really chewed through them and thought things through and have a sense of what's knowable and what's not knowable. So, the idea would be to have something like a residential library where people could come and study and have visiting faculty who could mentor people. That's the dream.
Yeah, I see. So
that's the great dream.
In a way, it's like the sort of core of the Catherine Project, what
Right.
you're doing now is like this foundational work.
Yeah.
We're going to give you this foundation in the great books.
Right.
And also kind of teach you the joys and like pleasures of reading widely.
Right.
But then if you want to,
Yes.
you want to narrow, and which is kind of the dream of humanistic education too, is like we all get this broad foundation. We all feel like we're kind of immersed in this tradition.
Yeah.
And then you don't write a dissertation on like why the great books are great. you write a dissertation on some subset of some small problem about Homer's Odyssey, and you're going into archival research or doing work on histories of languages or reception history, all this stuff, which you're not going to get in like your Life of the Mind seminar.
No,
Because
exactly.
you're reading a little bit of Homer, but you're reading Plato and you're reading...
Exactly. Or even just the type of work. I mean, there's a lot of thinking that can be done about the books that is just a matter of reading it carefully, learning the original language, reading around it. So, what's it responding to? What responded to it? Reading the commentaries. That already gets you a lot of really interesting angles on a book that you don't get when you just read it for class that meets 2 hours a week. So yeah, I'd like to foster that, and I think it could be like Catherine Project. I've always tried to be open about what if it's successful will contribute, right? So, and one thought is when all the institutions die in the post-apocalyptic wasteland, when we're all eating out of trash cans and warming ourselves by fires, out in the open, and there's broken TV sets everywhere, and so I don't know where these images come. They're probably from Mad Max. Is that where all the images come from?
Yeah. And they weren't reading Homer at night.
No. So when all of that is there, there'll be a Catherine Project.
Mm-hmm.
We'll still be reading books and talking about them in this post-apocalyptic landscape. But the other, that's one, just preserving something that might die. But in a way, it would be better if instead of that, it provoked some reform on the part of the institutions. One of the things I think it has shown, and programs like it do show, and this I know something also Jennifer Frey has been arguing, there's been a kind of myth that people don't want to study this stuff anymore. That I think is really obviously not true. People really, really want to study it.
Yeah.
And they choose not to major in it, in part because the administrators and often the faculty are telling them that it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to make your way in the world and the people who hold the power and the keys to the future are telling you it's a waste of time, then you better listen to them, because they're going to be able to tell you, they're going to be able to help you into the next stage, whatever it is. So anyway, this Catherine grad program or whatever it is has a similar structure. Yeah. So maybe it will take the place of these graduate programs that are likely to close, and especially for people who aren't necessarily going to become academics, but who want to get to the next level. Or maybe it will become, maybe this will be the university of the future.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Because you see these legacy institutions. I think the one that always comes to mind is the University of Chicago, because it's just faced so many problems in the last couple of years. But they're talking about cutting Sanskrit at the University of Chicago. And I'm thinking, like, humanities at Chicago that doesn't have ancient languages isn't Chicago anymore. Like, in my head, that's like one of the places you go. And they would say, well, the undergrad classes in Sanskrit only have 3 students.
Right.
Well, of course they do. Right?
Right.
But I thought one of the things you were able to do as the University of Chicago was be the place where Sanskrit was preserved, because with a lot of these ancient languages, sometimes ancient languages are lost, and we have to rebuild our knowledge of them.
Yes.
And we could be facing a moment where the institutional knowledge of some of these languages is gone.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we have to find some way for some people to learn them, because in 100 years or 200 years, people are going to wish that we still had access to these texts, and we don't want to have to do all of the, we don't want to be like the 19th century Germans trying to piece together all of this stuff all over again, because they already did it for us.
Yeah, that's right. They've already done it for us. No, I think the University of Chicago is heartbreaking. I've shared this story before, but I was a student at Chicago years ago. It was one of the places I first went. Maybe my second graduate program out of 3. I jumped around a lot in graduate school. But by chance, a friend of the family was married to a Hittitologist, so I got invited to a party of Hittitologists.
Okay,
and it was a Hittitologists, Assyriologists. Like knowing ancient Greek was like having taken French in high school.
Yeah,
it was just way below the level.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to the guys who were putting together the Hittite dictionary, and they had started 20 years earlier. The Germans had started at A. So there was a German university who was working on it too. They had started at A, and this group had started at L, and they'd gotten to R. So this was decades-long work, which was basically reconstructing a language that is really pretty important for the history of the Near East. Like it's all integrated into ancient Egypt and ancient Persia and the Hebrew Bible and all kinds of stuff. And the thought that they're not going to support work like that anymore is absolutely shocking.
Because it's like, if a university can't do it, what's the point?
Exactly.
like that's like what you were for.
Exactly. And the fact that they might offer some like ethics and AI courses instead, it's like, well, I could read about that on Substack. Like,
Yeah.
why do I need to go to a course at the University of Chicago to learn about ethics and AI,
Yeah.
or, to learn any of the things which, one of the things I think, and this is not an original thought to me at all. I mean, one of the things universities have taken on is the education of the workforce, and it seems to me a really bad bargain.
Mm-hmm.
They don't means the companies who hire the people don't take any responsibility for the training of their own employees, and they don't have to worry, the companies don't, if they've trained someone for something that's become obsolete by the time they finish their course.
Mm-hmm.
So the universities sort of eagerly take on this useful, socially relevant task that then they end up doing kind of a bad job at.
Yeah, something I've written about before or made YouTube videos about is that universities have like 7 different missions.
That's right.
And one of them they'll say is like, we're training students to be full participants in a democratic society.
Right.
And then there's the sort of German model we inherited of like the blending of teaching and research.
Right.
And then there's this maybe preservation of knowledge, but then there's workforce training. So that's at least 4. Maybe they only have 4, but I'm sure we can come up with a few more.
Right.
Promote social justice might be another one. Like you can think of a bunch of them. And institutions that have a lot of missions tend to do all of them rather poorly. I'm not saying you only have to have one.
Yes.
You might have multiple goals, but the more you have,
Right.
the worse you tend to be able to do. And this is how I kind of feel about modern universities.
I'm just thinking that I don't know how badly they do college football, actually.
They do quite well.
I feel like college football is a flourishing
and
university
you can see that
project.
And you see that reflected in the budgets.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I love football. But again, is this, I think mission creep, the loss of the mission is a big cause of the kinds of crises that we're seeing now, and lack of clear thinking about what an institution with a mission looks like.
Yeah. One of the things I like to think about a lot, but I'm curious to hear like what you think this is just the concept of an autodidact.
Yes.
And I would just like, what is an autodidact for you?
Yes. An autodidact is obviously someone who teaches themselves, who's self-taught. I tend to think about it in terms of examples. So probably my favorite example is Malcolm X, who obviously a highly intelligent person growing up in an extremely a society where it was extremely difficult for a Black man to have a job that suited his abilities. And, he ends up in prison for theft when he's pretty young. And at that time, they have prison libraries, which I think they don't anymore, really, of that kind. So they don't have prison libraries stuffed with the classics. They have prison libraries with a few out-of-date copies of, like, Business 101, or something like that, or self-help, stuff like that. So anyway, he read the entire prison library, vast swathes of the prison library, and just became a different person. I think of that as being an autodidact. I think you don't need to be alone to be an autodidact. So other examples are, there's this wonderful book that I've promoted for years called The Intellectual Life of the British Working Classes, Jonathan Rose. And he describes these, it was part of the labor movement in the UK, although also in the US, where groups of workers would get together and they would educate themselves. They would decide, they would pick an evening, they would pick something to read, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Descartes. They'd study astronomy or math or science or literature, Shakespeare, classics. And they would teach themselves. They didn't necessarily have professors coming in to teach them things, although that happened, I think, a bit later. There was sort of middle-class involvement, and, people would do outreach of that kind. But it was something that they did for themselves. So, an autodidact is someone who takes responsibility for their own learning and doesn't learns outside of a professional context. There's some way that everyone's actually an autodidact. So
I call myself, I have a PhD. I call myself an autodidact
yeah,
because
yeah,
after I left my PhD, I realized there were all these gaps in my education
yeah.
and I was never going to be able to take a seminar on them. And so I read it, and I understand I'm stretching the term a little bit here.
No, I'm just going to stretch it even more for you because there's a way in which, even though I've been in academic institutions for every year of my life, apart from 3 where I was in a monastery, I think in a way I am an autodidact. I think everyone is an autodidact because you don't really learn seriously unless you're teaching yourself, unless you are doing this for your own reasons, right? An expert can tell you something, but you still have to decide whether it's true, even though you don't actually have the basis, the expertise to judge it.
Yeah.
There's no learning without the participation of the learner. And so that's why I think calling attention to autodidacticism or nurturing autodidacticism, as Catherine Project does, it's really important as to remind people of what actually is core to any kind of education.
Yeah.
That the mind is not like a human being, it is not just a passive sponge for content that's somehow been verified somewhere else. That's a vision that we have that I think really has long roots before the internet, but the internet has kind of exploded, emphasized. But we are active seekers of knowing and understanding and imagining, and in order for us to learn well and live well, we have to find within ourselves the questions and the desires to learn, and we have to find ways to inquire and think about things. And we can help one another, and experts can help us too. But in the end, it's really what you do.
Yeah.
That's the nature of learning.
There is no substitution for like the act of thinking.
Exactly.
And one of the things I hate about book summaries, right, is they want to present these propositions that they've extracted from books. And then you go, okay, actually, I was writing about this recently. I was reading Aristotle's Politics, which I hadn't read before.
Yes.
And I love the Nicomachean Ethics, and at some point it became shameful that I hadn't read the Politics.
Yes.
And I tried to distill down like the propositions that you could definitely attribute to Aristotle from that book. and there aren't that many.
No. No. It's a very hard book.
And then you wonder, like, why would you read it? And you go, well, through thinking through all of these examples that because it's unlike even the Nicomachean Ethics, because it'll be a short philosophical discussion and then 20 pages of examples from Greek history.
Right.
And you go, like, why would you bother with all of these examples?
Yeah.
It's like, because, well, he's actually giving you the opportunity to think through these principles that he's sort of floated for you, and then see how it worked out, and then to see how it's played out in history. And then you have to actually decide if any of those propositions or principles are true, if you agree with them. Like I think Aristotle's a great model for this.
Yeah.
He really makes you think for yourself while reading him.
Yes. Yes.
And you wouldn't get that if you just attended a lecture and then said, this was Aristotle's political theory, and the professor handed you a list of, I only identified 4 or 5 propositions that I felt like very, very
You're going to have to tell me later what they are. I want to know what they are.
Yeah.
But I think it's true, even if you were totally persuaded of every Aristotelian principle, you would still have to figure out how to see all those cases and to see what's going on around you in light of those cases. And that is really not a simple task. That's a serious kind of training that takes years. And there's no substitute for it. And why would you expect there to be?
Yeah.
Why would you expect there to be an algorithm for how to make elections in the United States work better? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, you have to look at the way things are. You have to look at the kinds of problems we've had in the past. You have to look at the kinds of constraints there are and what's possible. And then you have to try some things out, and then and maybe there is no right answer for something on that larger scale, and you can only fix the voting procedures in Texas or something like that. But we've really gotten pretty deep into a view of human thinking and agency that's really dangerously false.
Yeah.
And that's definitely part of what I feel like I've been trying to work for.
And also when you're coming to a book like the Politics,
Right.
Aristotle gives you all these cases from Greek history,
Right.
and you need to think through them.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't limit yourself to only those cases too.
Yes.
We have thousands of years of history,
Yes.
post-Aristotle, of
Yes.
political history
Yes.
that we can also draw on.
Yes.
And I think if you could sort of talk to Aristotle reading the book, he would say, like, why aren't you writing about
Yeah.
the U.S. in the 1960s as well when you're talking about the politics? Like, I was reading it on my Substack. I run like a sort of informal book club on my newsletter, and some people were like, well, why would I care about those examples so much? I was like, well, okay, like we'll talk through all of those examples if you want, and we probably should, but we have 1,000 other examples we could talk about, and just bring them up. Like, what are the ones that stick out in your head? Because also Aristotle is mostly writing about cities.
Right.
Most of us don't live in anything like
That's right.
the city
That's right.
as he envisioned it.
That's right.
And yet, if we think we can learn something
Right.
through the act of reading Aristotle, like it requires this very active process.
Yes. It's something I think that was in the air in the culture even relatively recently. So there's a beautiful piece by George Kennan, who is one of the great 20th century diplomats, and a beautiful writer. So Kennan's diaries are, fabulous stuff to read. But he has a little essay on education for statesmanship. He was thinking about things like working for the State Department or being a political person. And he's like, look, there's not a technique. You have to learn everything there is to know about history, literature, human nature. Like, that's what you're dealing with. You're working with real life. And so as much as you can learn about how things work, have worked in the past, work in this particular place, that's all going to be material for you to make judgments, but there's not going to be any substitute for making that judgment. Yeah. So we used to know this and we've forgotten.
So if you're talking to someone who says like this dream of being an autodidact sounds so appealing.
Yeah.
I wish that were me.
Yeah.
Do you ever encounter someone who expresses this? Like, I wish I were a reader, or I wish I were someone who did this.
Yes.
I mean, I usually just would say the answer is just do it. You know, like you become it in the act of doing.
That's right. That's right.
But I mean, do you have any like words that you share with them?
I think most of the people who I meet who say that, who like get this faraway look in their eyes and say, "Oh, I would like to do that," or "Oh, I could never do that," or "That's just not my kind of thing. I'm just not a reader. I'm just not a thinker." I tend to think, it's not true. There may be people who are like that. I don't think I've ever met one, and I'm not persuaded. Okay, so and the only way you would really know is if you made a serious attempt and somehow it would not work. I don't know what not working even looks like. Because if you read something and it doesn't make any sense to you and it makes you angry, that's a form of learning. It doesn't have to be. I think people imagine that learning looks differently than it really does, and it's very messy. It's very nitty gritty. It's frustrating.
I used to identify topics for papers in grad school by what made me mad. And like it was almost like a joke amongst my cohort that like Jared looks angry, he's probably going to write about this. And it would usually be because I would be like, why doesn't this make sense? And I would get this sense of frustration, and that was like my sort of signal for there's something there.
I had a teacher in college who said that once. He said, if you really hate something, it might be because you understand something else. So it's always worth trying to work it out. So I think people who are in that situation, it's going to be hard to do on your own. I think that's also a kind of myth of autodidacticism, that the way to do it is to sit down in your study and then just read through all the books. And there are people like that. I think Naomi Kanaki is like that, actually. That's my suspicion. But most people are not like that. Most people need other people to do it. And you may have a friend who you're just a little bit too shy to ask about, or a coworker, or someone in your neighborhood, or someone in your family. But if not, that is basically what one way of thinking about the Catherine Project. We supply the people for you to read with, who are kind, who will be helpful, and who will be there for you to try out whatever you need to try out to get comfortable with it.
I love that in the Catherine Project, there are like these like rogue reading groups that happen sometimes. Like two people from a reading group are just like, I want to keep reading something. And we can't spin it up into a full thing. And then like they'll just like keep going. And I think like that's in some ways
Yes.
like the ideal outcome.
Yes.
Because it's almost like
Yes.
you have moved beyond the need of like the institution
Yes.
formalizing your reading group, and now
Yes.
you're just going to meet and talk about Kierkegaard even more.
Exactly.
Like, that's the dream.
Jordan and I have often said this, that our dream is to put ourselves out of business.
Yeah.
Like people find reading with one another so natural, so normal that they just do it, and they don't need us to help them do it. So yeah, that's a big part of how we're thinking about it.
Because even when I think about autodidacts, one of the people that comes to mind is Spinoza,
Yeah.
just because he never existed in a university context.
Right.
But he had private teachers when he was younger,
Yes.
and he's engaged in a lot of correspondence.
Yes.
And I think like the art of like intellectual correspondence is
Right.
maybe something we don't do as often anymore.
Yes.
Twitter kind of was like this for a bit.
It was
but,
a little bit like
but
that,
you know, but it's very short.
Yeah.
But the idea of like, I'm just going to take the ideas seriously. I don't know what to make of them. I'm going to
Yeah.
send a letter to someone.
Right.
I mean, when I read the Meditations to Descartes, not Spinoza, I think the correspondence and replies
Yeah.
are almost infinitely more interesting than the meditations themselves.
Oh, I'm pretty obsessed with meditations,
Okay.
but that would be again something to fight about off camera or
Yeah.
something. Like I think the meditations are just incredible.
Yeah.
The more I read them, the more I'm just astonished that
Yeah.
this exists. Yeah. Well, part of what I think, we're trying to do with Catherine Project, or what I'm trying to do in thinking about this more specialized version of it, the sort of in-depth study version of it, is we fetishize academic programs. We think all study has to be for a degree, and all degrees have to be given by universities, and that's how we pursue an interest in something. We fetishize these things, and if we look at the past, we see that there were a lot of different ways of becoming an educated person. Yeah, there's the aristocratic private tutor. There's the correspondence with others. There's just I think Michael Faraday was self-educated. I don't think that he had any formal education. I think he just started to got interested in electricity and magnetism and started spending a lot of time looking at it. A lot of the people who invent fields, right? They were never trained in those fields. So Darwin was never trained in evolutionary biology.
Yeah.
He just liked to look at stuff and, got on boats and just wrote a bunch of stuff down.
What's going on with these birds?
Exactly.
And then suddenly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think for us to really grow in grow in knowledge, have the life of the mind come alive, we have to break down the fetish. Like specialized degrees can be great. I'm very grateful I have a PhD. I studied with great people, incredible experience, but it wasn't the only way to become educated. There are other ways.
I had this experience when I left academia, which was that, so I finished my PhD. I knew I had an industry job, right?
Yeah.
Or as sometimes people in the academy called it, a civilian job, which I always found so strange.
Yeah, that's very strange.
We're not in the military, right?
Yeah.
I'm not becoming a civvy now, but and part of it was emotional. I just felt like I was leaving academia behind, so I kind of felt like they'd rejected me too.
Yes.
And then I just started thinking like, what's the point of philosophy? And I basically didn't read philosophy for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And just like read novels I wanted to read, but I basically started thinking,
right.
Well, how I now see it is this. I had been initiated into like this guild structure where, you study with a master, you produce your work.
Yes.
And I had been sort of given the stamp, and then I hadn't gone and gotten a job.
Right.
So I was no longer part of it. And so now thinking is for those people. Philosophy is for those people. And I now see like the trajectory of like the last 5 years of my life is like reminding myself and then wanting to remind other people that I was completely wrong.
Yeah.
that philosophy was just as much mine when I left academia, and in fact was mine before I got the PhD too.
Yes.
And that it's true for all of you as well.
Yes. And that's also a case of mistaking university constraints, which are totally contingent. There's no reason why. I was in Oxford on sabbatical not that long ago, and I learned about, All Souls College. If you are ever a fellow at All Souls College, which is very difficult to do, it's like a very, very prestigious college, you're always a fellow. So they have people who, work in London, real jobs, and if they'd like to come back and study, they can do that. They can live in the college, they can work in the library. That's a just an institution that just didn't have this idea that if you don't find a permanent position, you're cast out into the darkness. And there's no reason for us to think this way.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for us to think that there's only one way of using a degree, that an institution has to be closed to people that aren't in this like special guild. There's no reason for us to fetishize like a particular set of programs as like the only place where it really happens, you know?
Yeah.
So there's so many sort of fantastical mythologies around academia. And one of the best things about leaving it, or even for a time, is those start to become more apparent. And you're like, why did I?
Yeah, you have to make the choice.
Yes.
You have to say, like, did I do it because I loved it? Or
Yes.
did I do it because I liked being part of an institution?
Right.
And ideally, you could love it and be part of the institution. But, like,
Right.
but if you're not part of the institution, you have to
Right.
say, like, did I do it because I loved it? And I was like, the answer was yes.
Yeah.
So the answer should still be yes.
That's right.
And that was really important to me.
Yeah, that's
But
beautiful.
there were like material circumstances that made it harder for me to see that at first.
Yes.
As soon as you lose your university email,
Right.
you lose access to journals
Right.
for a lot, or it becomes a lot
Yes.
harder to access journals.
Yes.
You know, you're emailing friends and being like, can you send me these articles? And, you know,
Right.
sometimes they do it. Sometimes it takes
Right.
a few days. You know, like it's the way that it can feel from the outside like knowledge is very heavily gatekept
Yeah.
because things like journals or books that cost
Right.
$200 to buy your own copy.
Yes.
But you can get
Yes.
it at any
Yes.
university library. You just feel like you're kept out from that.
This is something that has really gotten dramatically worse since all those library materials went online. In a way, of course, the online research library is an incredible resource.
Yeah.
You can find stuff much more easily. There's all kinds of databases and indexes that are much easier to use than the old big paper ones were that I was trained on because
Yeah.
I'm just old enough to have done that. But they have really locked up all of the specialized research.
Yeah.
And to the point where I don't have regular access as someone who teaches at a college.
Yeah.
I don't have regular access to much specialized research. I'm always hustling to get an affiliation with a major research university of some kind just so I can use the library, so I
Yeah.
can get into their library and have access to their materials.
This is my call to anyone at UT Austin. If you want to make me an affiliate of any kind, just so I can use your freaking library, please.
Yeah. Whereas when I was a graduate student, a young graduate student, you could go into any university library. You might have to go into an office or show an ID, and you would have access to everything. You
Yeah.
couldn't check things out, but you had access to it. And one of the things I'm thinking, I'm just telling you all my random ideas that I chew over.
This is why people listen to podcasts.
Okay. Well, here's a random idea I'm chewing over that I'll never have the expertise to undertake, so someone else should do it. But it's a scandal that science is kept like that. You ought to be able to learn about a scientific topic by reading the original papers. They should not be kept behind these incredibly expensive subscription services. It's only making the whole process less accountable, less transparent, and it undermines people's trust, And it also reinforces this idea that somehow an ordinary person can't understand this stuff. I have this treasured memory, which I think about from time to time, of being in high school, and I had to give a report for biology. And I was like, I'm interested in mitochondria. It was probably from like Madeline L'Engle. I think mitochondria are in Madeline L'Engle, right? I was like, I want to do a report on mitochondria. How am I going to find out about mitochondria? This is pre-internet, right?
Yeah.
So I looked in an encyclopedia. My mother was working as an assistant at an office in University of California, San Francisco at a med school. So one day I went in with her to the office. I went to the med school library, and I tried to read all these articles about mitochondria, most of which I couldn't understand very well. But certain things did eventually kind of sink in, even though I was completely unqualified to read them. It's such a treasured thought that like you could just, as like a 15-year-old, wander into a medical school library and try to figure out about something that you were interested in. And probably if I'd been a little bit a different kind of person, I could have asked a librarian and gotten even more help and gotten even more explanations. So like learning should be broadly accessible. It's really, really important.
And it's not like the students are using all the tables at the library.
No, no, exactly.
So there's
exactly.
probably room for a few people from the city.
Well, they're usually in there like on their Insta or something.
Yeah,
But
when I was at Boston University, that's where I started my PhD before I went to Connecticut. There was this big scandal because they wanted to take up more and more of the library as co-working spaces.
Yes.
And it was already the main floor.
Yes.
And then like the graduate students had carols in the stacks, and we were like fighting really hard. Like, no, do not put more tables there, because you would just get these undergrads who came in and just like had music playing.
Yeah,
while they were.
exactly. No, it's a scandal. The destruction of the academic libraries is a very serious scandal. It's not been enough reported. Yeah, they put the books off site. I mean, it's so bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could go on about this for a long time.
Yeah. I think there's some places that do this better than others. In the sciences, or at least some of the sciences, they do a much better job of putting preprints on like archive and things like that.
Right.
Philosophy does a decent job because we have fill papers, but it's not yet the norm to always put your preprints up. So younger professors tend to do it a bit better.
Right.
Someone who I think's actually great about this is Robert Brandom. Posts like everything he's ever written in incredibly accessible forms on his website.
Right.
You could even read A Spirit of Trust before it was published because he just put the Word doc on his website.
No, or I mean, I think David Chalmers did a ton of work on this kind of stuff, right? I mean, he was really the pioneer.
And it took a lot of buy-in. They had to ask a lot of people for money because it takes a lot of like resources to host something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I would like to see, and this is much, much harder to do than to found an organization like the Catherine Project, but I would like to see just a different kinds of platforms for the presentation of this kind of research that were open access or minimal access, and I don't know what would have to happen for that to take place, but I wish people who had the resources and the abilities and the understanding would start doing that. That's for sure.
Yeah, when it comes to like books, the beauty of being able to go to a library and just like look at it, even if you can't check it out, is you can at least then make a decision if you want to buy it.
Yes.
Because you might open it up and realize this book isn't what you thought it was.
Right.
And if you're buying it and there was one academic book I wanted to buy that was on like the history of logic. And it was $145.
Yes.
I had to think,
was it Neil? I think I've seen it. Maybe.
No,
it
was I think her last name is Macbeth, Danielle Macbeth or something like this. But I really just wanted like 2 chapters from it.
Yes.
I was like, but if I buy the $145 book, and the 2 chapters are not what I'm looking for. that is a lot of money.
Well, I think something that people who notice have been learning about these things is there is a way that books present information and library shelves, bookshelves present information that's extremely helpful. Like it's not digital.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that it's not a better way necessarily of presenting or processing information. One way that sort of gets cashed out in my world is, and this is another way in which I think academic work is becoming worse. Online search engines, you can find what you're looking for much more easily than you can in a paper library. But you can't find the things you didn't know you were looking for as easily.
Yeah.
So you have to have a tag or a target, whereas you can wander into a library that has real bookshelves. You can go sit down in a section that you've never been in before. You can sit there for an hour or two reading stuff off the shelves, and you will learn stuff about what's out there. Or if you go in for one thing and you look up at all the shelves around it, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's So I've learned so much from bookshelves, card catalogs, stuff like that. And not to speak of just. There is an instant of picking up a book that you're talking about. Like you pick up the book and you open it up and you're like, no.
Yeah.
Or, yes, this is the book. This is the book I've been waiting for.
Or like that feeling of like, it's about this, but it's also about this other thing that I couldn't have possibly expected. And it turns out that's really important. It's
exactly.
It's so cool.
Exactly.
I came of age in the profession. I started my PhD at 2013.
Yeah.
And I've actually never physically read a journal, like a philosophy journal.
Wow.
And we were starting to phase out at every school I went to, even
Yeah.
getting the physical journals.
That's right.
We
Yeah.
could go back and look
Yeah.
at old issues of like Mind or something like that,
Right.
but it would stop after like 1990 something, because at that point we had
Right.
started to do it
Right.
online, and that was the only way you could access journals.
Yeah.
But the way that you even go looking for related papers is you start looking for, who cited this, and
Right.
you use those, and that's useful.
Yeah.
It's useful to see how the conversation developed. It's not useful to see maybe the paper that got neglected,
Yeah, that's right.
where actually there was this insight, and
Right.
you could write a paper that's like, why didn't anyone notice this weird response to David Lewis in 82
Yes,
that
that's right.
actually was like more fruitful than the
Yeah.
conversation that did develop.
Yeah, or just sitting down with a couple of years of a journal and just looking at what there is and reading a few paragraphs of each of them. Once again, you can learn a ton that way. And you get exposed to questions you wouldn't have asked. You find out about authors or topics you've never known about. So I don't have, I'm not sharp enough about this stuff to know exactly what it is about the online context that makes it so difficult to do that kind of thing. And it's, of course, not that you can browse back issues of a journal, but it's just the flipping around is not as easy, and so the a lot of information is just a little harder to get, and that little bit that it's harder makes it the whole thing.
Do you think that
commonly practiced?
The sort of transition, maybe it's the transition to digital, maybe it's the way that academics publish way more than they used to. They publish so many articles.
Yes.
I have this sense, and I don't even know if I have arguments for it, so I just want to view that academic debates have become more trendy in the sense that a new topic emerges.
Yeah.
Everyone writes 12 articles about it.
Right.
And then it can kind of quickly get abandoned.
Right.
And then you kind of wonder, like, what was the point of this 5-year period? Where we did this. The example that comes to mind, it's unfair to only use this example, but it's the only one that I have ready.
Grounding.
Well, grounding might have been one of them, right? But so I have 2 examples now.
Yeah.
No, would be Miranda Fricker's book, Epistemic Injustice,
Right.
which I think is great. I think that book itself is great.
Yeah.
Everything became epistemic something.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I had a professor in grad school who just wondered, I'm waiting for the day a student gives me a paper about epistemic tuna fish sandwiches. Right?
That's right. That's right.
And I was looking at journals recently. I saw a few people still using it, but it's like not as big as it was maybe, right around 2015 or so.
Right.
And I was like really into like reading this stuff.
Right.
And then you kind of wonder, like, okay, like what's the point of the literature at that point? Like what did it all kind of contribute to?
Well, I think that's probably been true for a while, because I remember when I was in grad school in very late 90s, early 2000s, fictionalism. So it was like someone wrote modal fictionalism. It was very, very hot.
The Gideon Rosen paper,
Gideon Rosen paper. And then there was other kinds of fictionalism, moral fictionalism. And I'll never forget the moment, because I was still in grad school, when there was fictionalism about fictions.
Yeah.
And Gil Harman, who was this kind of sage guy who was pretty old at that time, was just like, yeah, it had to happen.
Yeah.
Fictionalism about fictions. So there is, I think there's a way where you have kind of a word and a grid, and you can plug in certain words and kind of auto-generate philosophy papers.
There's this great title of, it's something like, does the grounds grounding ground the grounded or something?
Yeah. I can't even say that. I mean, I think there's a built-in institutional incentive for that kind of trendiness, because if you're a young faculty member or a graduate student and you want your work to be read, which is necessary for you to be promoted or to be hired at a fancy department, then the way to do that is to get into a conversation that people who are important are paying attention to. So it's just a kind of cruddy incentive. I think it's been there for a while, but it's one of the many cruddy incentives. Writing something really interesting about something that's not on trend is people are just less likely to read it. Yeah.
I shouldn't think in these terms, but I was looking back at like my own like Google Scholars page recently, and I only have a couple of journal articles before I left, but one of them has been cited way more than the others, and has gotten like response papers to it.
Yes.
Some papers I didn't even know about. Right? And I was like, oh wow, that was a good paper. Now I happen to think it was the best paper I ever published, but I was like, wait, no, that's not why it was a good paper. I had totally let the metric like subsume the value of the act.
That's very relatable. I had the opposite experience. So I I published this paper I was very proud of in 2012, just before I went into the monastery. And then I was there for 3 years and didn't have a lot of contact with the journals. Every now and then, one of my friends would send me like philosophy articles, which were like the biggest treat in the world.
Yeah.
Nothing like being in like the East Woods of Eastern Canada for like reading a philosophy article to be the most fun thing you can imagine. But anyway, I was out and I was applying for a job at St. John's, and I wanted to remember what it was like to do philosophy. So I went to a library, and where I had a membership, fortunately, and I started looking through the journals, and I was like, well, I wonder if anyone responded to my article, And it was very, very little. It was crushing.
Yeah.
Because I had worked so hard on it, and I was so proud of it, and I was so sure that it was really good. And the one thing I have done ever since, and or I've tried to do, is if I read something I really like, I try to send the person a note.
Oh, yeah,
Because I think it just help to, encourage people who are in that situation where they're like, wow, I put like years into this. And, one person casually read it and like put it in one footnote.
Yeah,
like, that's just too much. Yeah. Academia is such a weird, it's such a totally strange practice. Well, what do you see from where you are? What do you think the world needs as far as the life of the mind is concerned?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different thoughts about this. There's first this just like baseline, which is a lot of what you're doing in the Catherine Project related to this is just showing people that it's possible for more people than already expect it.
Right.
And this is something that in like my online work that I'm most proud of. I have this kid in my Discord server who is applied to a few colleges, and like he just interviewed at MIT. Like he's going to be great, right? But one of the schools he was looking at was St. John's. Right. He's like, I wouldn't have even looked at, and I didn't go to St. John's. It's just like I started talking about the great books. Yeah. He started reading them when he was in high school, and then he applied to St. John's, and he's like, I don't think I'll go because I want to go to an engineering school, but like the fact that he took it seriously, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I've had a few people say like, I actually went back to school to finish my degree and I switched to philosophy because of you.
Oh, and I think wonderful.
I think that's great. Yeah. But there's another guy in my sort of broader online community who is a physics PhD and now spends his free time reading Hegel. and he has no interest in writing about philosophy, but he likes to read Hegel. And like, I view that as like, and there have been others, people who didn't go to college who were in their 50s or 60s who saw something I read and thought, I'll read it for myself. And they read Homer for the first time. Right. These things aren't even texts that I know incredibly well, but it's just like saying they're great and you could just pick them up. Yes. And you can get them for cheap. Like, like this, the actual barriers to this are so low. Exactly. You are the biggest barrier to it. And that's worked out really well. And I'm really happy with this. But there's this broader sort of philosophical point that I like to make, which is actually the subject of the book I'm writing, which is I think we have lost a sense of the value of contemplation. Right. And I actually sort of my move that I'm making is that I think a lot of the time when people are talking about problems of focus or attention spans, they feel this longing for something. They feel this thirst that hasn't been quenched. Yeah. And they think what it is about training your attention span so you can do more productive work or something. But what I really think is there's this older idea of like contemplation and leisure and this kind of healthy idleness that I want to kind of show people is really valuable as part of their human flourishing. Yes. And so I think like showing that is this big barrier because there's this kind of cultural logic that people have imbibed. Productivity is good. Yeah. And in some sense, that's true. Right. But in the sense of if you let filling your days with activity do everything, well, since at least Aristotle, we've known that's a way to not live a flourishing life. That's right. Life. That's right. And, I see like in Hannah Arendt's work where she talks about the sort of inversion of work, labor and things, and like the vita activa becoming the only thing that mattered. To the point where the vita contemplativa is like completely ignored. Yeah. I think that's like the first kind of move we have to do is like to show that there's actually this part of you as a human being who wants this. Yes. And you might not even know you want it because you don't have the words for it yet. Yes. And you can get it through, the contemplation can come in many forms. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes. One of them that I like to focus on because it's what I like to do is reading can be a contemplative activity. Yeah. intellectual activity can be a contemplative activity. Writing can even be a contemplative activity.
That's right.
And just showing that like there's something that you will get out of it
Yeah.
that looks very different than in terms of I was able to publish 6 articles or I was able to read 100 books. You know, it's not going to be it's not going to be quantitative in the same way, but there's this
Right.
qualitative difference to your life that will come through it.
Yeah, I like that a lot because I feel like one of the flaws of a lot of the self-help literature, including the attention span literature, is it's all sort of punitive. It's like you just have to make yourself do this. You got to like set up a routine. Like you have to stop doing this. You got to stop doing that. You know, you got to like whatever. And at least for myself, I mean, I am particularly bad at discipline, unusually bad at discipline. But it never works. The negative never works.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really shouldn't be doing this. There's nothing easier than saying, I really shouldn't be doing this. I really should have gotten out of bed earlier. I really should turn off Twitter. I really should do this. I really should do that. But what really does actually help you is really wanting to do something and enjoying it. And even if it's a little harder to do than the easier, cheaper things, like having the memory of having done it and how much you liked it is a huge motivator. It is absolutely the biggest engine for changing a person's life, is knowing that there was something that you really enjoyed doing that you're not doing and wanting to get back to.
For a really long time, I never wanted to put it in terms of pleasure.
Yeah.
Because I thought like, no, you should do this because it matters.
Yeah, it seems so superficial to say pleasure. Yeah.
But I realized I was being like more strict about this than Aristotle. which was like a good barometer for me. Sometimes you might want to, because you're going to train yourself actually to take pleasure in the activities as you participate in them. And even last night I was scrolling on my phone and I thought to myself, would I rather be reading? I didn't think I shouldn't be doing this. I thought, would I rather be reading? And the answer is yes. And it becomes much easier to put your phone down if you think I would rather be doing. And then I read something and I loved it, you know. And then I went to bed happy.
No, it's really true. I mean, it's funny for me to say this. I don't like the word pleasures myself. It's in my book title. I don't think it's been a while. I don't think they'd mind if I said it wasn't my title. I didn't want hidden pleasures, intellectual life in it at all.
This happens all the time.
Yeah. So I didn't want it there. I might even joy. It has a little saccharine flavor to it. And I do think that even though Aristotle thinks training in pleasure is the key to excellence and happiness, I think he thinks that contemplation is naturally pleasurable. So you're not like, it's not like every time you contemplate you eat a cookie or something. Like, oh, I'm training myself. You know, like I just associate contemplating with cookies. It's great. He knew, I think, that there was a richer pleasure versus a shallower pleasure, and a pleasure that could actually organize your life in a deeply fulfilling way that made sense and it was worthwhile. So I still think there should be a better word than pleasure, but I don't know exactly how to put it.
The image I love is from Happiness and Contemplation by Joseph Pieper, where he just describes it as a thirst that needs to be quenched.
Yes.
And that when it's been quenched, you realize, oh, how fulfilling and how refreshing this was. Like you've been returned to this natural state.
Yes, I think that's right.
And without it, and sometimes you didn't even realize you were thirsty.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. In some ways, it's one of the losses, I'm sure someone else has said this, of the digital age, is that because our attention is for sale and people are always trying to buy it, you're under this constant pressure to pay attention to stuff that's already kind of on pre-directed paths, and you don't just think about it. You don't just have this restless, random sense of like you started paying attention to something, and so there's something new that opens up for you, and something that you enjoyed that you never thought you'd enjoy. Because we're always being like bombarded with stuff that people are telling us we will enjoy. And they know, they've got like 10 trillion scientists figuring out how we work, so they know how to do it. But yeah, I think that's right. Finding the things that you never thought you would enjoy, but in fact you've really always wanted. It's very.
And so this, and I think that maybe sometimes people might get put off by words like contemplation.
Right.
It has like a very particular religious valence in a lot of people's minds.
Yes.
It's why I like to remind them of Aristotle
Yeah.
a little bit.
Right.
But also to think that, but it's also useful to like look at the religious history a little bit too, to see it. There's this great book by Inbar Graver called Asceticism of the Mind. And it's this sort of like
I would love
modern
that, I think.
psychology and reading like the Desert Fathers.
Ah.
And a lot of it's about like Evagrius Ponticus. And Evagrius is really concerned with the fact that he can't pay attention to things.
Yes.
And he views this as this like disciplining of the mind to achieve what he would call like the naked mind.
Yeah. Wow.
So that it could sit still and like contemplate God.
Yeah.
And I'm like, then if you read Evagrius, he's talking about how like the demons keep talking to him and stuff. And like the demons don't want me to pay attention to anything. And I'm like, this is actually a very old human problem.
Yes.
It is it is not
Yes.
unique to the smartphone age.
No, that's right.
And that's why I think it's worth taking philosophically seriously. It's an indication that there's something philosophically serious going on here.
Yes.
Rather than just like, how do I reduce my screen time?
No, that's right.
And this is my sense actually with self-help.
Right.
Which is that a lot of self-help books are identifying like a real problem that people do have.
Right.
But they don't see like the deeper problem. They're like,
That's right.
I always feel distracted. Okay, here are 10 rules to like not get distracted anymore.
Yeah.
You're like, well, no, but like what's the value of attention?
Yes.
And what's the role of attention in a flourishing human life?
Yes.
And I think basically any self-help book that's kind of like this that does any good, it's usually because like they're almost at the problem problem.
Yes.
But like, this is what a philosopher would say.
Yeah, that's right. Of course. No, it's true that well, even in philosophy, I mean, I know that I remember getting frustrated. This was years ago, and there may be things that have helped it since then. I'm not up to date, but things I found very frustrating about like the virtue ethics literature was that virtue seemed kind of disconnected from any particular goal you had or any like what sense in which your life might be fulfilling. Which, of course, what a very important part of its origin in Plato and Aristotle is there's some kind of activity that your life culminates in, and virtue, in a way, is a means to an end. In a way, it matters for its own sake. In another way, it's a means to an end. It's a means to that kind of flourishing. And I just feel like it's a bit like the self-help books. It's like let's create these states in us that we've already decided are good without having any understanding of why. And we're not really looking at the cause of our discontent, the cause of our unhappiness. And that's because it's really hard to do that. But it doesn't let us off the hook for asking the question.
Something I found interesting, just like about how like modern philosophy handles things, and sort of looking back to ancient Greek philosophy or something, is that for a very long time philosophers were okay with saying that the philosophical life is like the best life.
Yes, yes. Everyone makes fun of us for that. It's like, I'm a philosopher. I'm a fireman. I think being a fireman is the best life. It's this self-regarding.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of philosophers that I know nowadays would laugh at it, right? They were like, no, it's like one good way to live a life. And okay, I want to acknowledge the motivations there are usually pretty good. Right. But part of me is like, why would you do this if you didn't think it was the best life? why would you? What's the account of why it matters so much at the very least?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think something like it is a condition for the best life. Philosophy is the best life, but that doesn't mean being a philosophy professor is the best life. I mean, it might be, it might not be.
Yeah.
But it's one of the reasons why the specialization of philosophy has done so much damage, because this is the kind of stuff everyone should be doing, as some kind of part of their life. Maybe it's going to look really different in different contexts, but I don't know. Now I sound like I was in Greece years ago once, and this taxi driver was like, "Oh, you study philosophy? All Greeks are philosophers. You never think about tomorrow. Take each day as it comes." I was like, "Okay, yes, you're right. That's philosophical too."
But I mean, the picture that Aristotle paints of the contemplative life, or even just demonstrates in his own work, is not narrowly philosophical in the sense we would now mean it.
No, I don't. Well, I think that's hard to tell, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's hard to tell. Maybe that's right. I think last time I thought about this,
This was me going out on a limb with you.
yeah, I'm not sure about that because I think he is basically saying my life, Aristotle's life, is the best life. What do I do? I look at plants, I look at rocks, I analyze the weather, I think about the soul, I think about God, I think about politics and ethics, everything under the sun. I think about it. And that's all I do all day.
Yeah.
So I think he does think that. I think in the politics, there is a sense, at the end of the politics, there's a sense where hearing stories is also a kind of contemplation.
Okay,
So
yeah,
you can
sure.
contemplate the virtues. You can contemplate great deeds, great human beings. And I used to think that was very strange sounding. Now it actually just sounds like what we like to do. It's I mean, why do people love to read biographies? They like to contemplate these lives and to contemplate their virtues, or sometimes to contemplate their vices, which is...
So to be clear, the point I was trying to make, which I didn't express really well,
No, don't worry.
is when I would say the philosophical life is the best life, it does not mean the life that is practiced by people who now call themselves philosophers exclusively.
Yes.
That in fact, being a very thoughtful scientist is part of this life. Being someone who is immersed in maybe if you're right about the end of the politics. Yeah. By the end of the politics, I was like, "What the hell is going on?"
Oh, I know. It's the worst book.
But it's how good is the political life? But someone who's immersed in stories or who is engaged in any kind of I probably have a more liberal view of this than Aristotle might have when it comes to the craftsman or something.
Yeah, that's right.
But engaged in this kind of prolonged intellectual activity of giving your attention to these things that matter and working through it.
Yeah.
I kind of view this as the broad philosophical life that I think.
Yeah, there's a really interesting book coming out sometime soon by Rachel Barney, who's a classical philosophy person who gave some lectures on craft. And one of the things she talks about is this, the ways in which real thinking can be a part of any kind of manual labor, craft labor, the production of something good. That's definitely also my experience. Yeah. Really, using your mind to think about the best way to make something, the best way to fix something. I think it's pretty exciting, actually. It's wildly underrated by both Plato and Aristotle.
Matthew Crawford, in a popular context,
of course,
has written a lot actually about the how intellectually demanding construction work is.
Yes.
In a way that you wouldn't expect at all if you don't have a lot of experience doing it.
Yeah.
And as someone who's only done a little bit of amateur woodworking, I certainly feel it's intellectually demanding because I'm
for sure.
Someone's I have to worry about grain and I have to worry about these certain cuts and I mean there's a lot going on, and then he does all this great work on how they learn through this know-how on how to think by the doing as well, the construction of jigs and stuff. But there's a lot of intellectual activity going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. It can be very fulfilling. So the thing I'm remembering is when I was living in Canada, I learned how to run a wood stove, including in little tiny cabins where it's your only source of heat and it's the middle of winter, which is where the challenge is significant. It really matters.
Yeah.
You do it right, and. Yeah, thinking through, that's a very, very basic skill, right? You need to know something about the weights of wood and the airflow and stuff like that, and the nature of your particular stove. But it's extremely interesting and exciting, and it takes a lot of thinking to get it right and to be good at it.
All right, I want to be mindful of your time.
Yes.
So I have a question I always end on, which is if you have a book recommendation for our listeners.
Yes, I was wondering about that. I think what I'd like to recommend is the book or the books I was most excited about most recently, which was last summer I read these Robert Caro books about Lyndon Johnson. These are very popular books. Lots of people know they're good. Because there's so many of them and they're so long, they're daunting in some way. But they are incredibly well written. They tell the whole story of 20th century America through Texas, where we are right now, and it's a particularly interesting view of Texas and kinds of characters that we think of as being what makes Texas Texas. Not just Lyndon Johnson, who has his own kind of sordid very complex mixture of very, very bad qualities and very, very good qualities, and you're never left off the hook because the writing is so good. Yeah. And it is. I think I was talking about this last night to a friend of mine who I was recommending them to, because that's basically what I do whenever I see someone. I'm like, you should read Lyndon Johnson. Yeah. And then every now and then, like once every 3 months, I meet someone who's actually read them, and then we just talk about them for hours. Okay, but there is this contemplative, what is it? What is it that holds a human being together? Like, what's the nature of political power, political ambition? How does a person maintain any kind of integrity in that kind of context? How does these very beautifully noble motivations, how do they coexist with this really venal self-absorption? And so I think Lyndon Johnson's a fascinating figure, and a lot of the people in there are fascinating, and they're absolutely masterpieces of books.
Excellent.
I think there's reason to think that they are the great books of today.
Okay.
So I recommend them really highly, especially anyone interested in. And yeah, it's a bit like a continuation of Aristotle's Politics. So you're reading through the casework, the cases, all of the things that happened in the 20th century, in the Senate and presidency, and trying to think about what worked and what didn't.
Awesome. Zena Hitz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Jared. It's a pleasure talking to you.